Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about a really specific topic, but it's a topic that I've been asked to cover by several of you. So hopefully those of you who need this are paying attention. Those of you who just join us regularly out of habit, maybe there's some new things that you'll learn or some new ways to look at Family Tree Maker that you hadn't thought of before. So today we're specifically going to cover the notes features in Family Tree Maker. We're going to talk about the different places where you can leave notes, how those notes do or do not sync with your online tree at Ancestry.com, and some of the uses for some of those notes features that maybe you hadn't thought of before, just to help keep you and your family history research on track. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm just going to go ahead and put all of the notes information up on the screen instead of unveiling it one at a time. There are three main kinds of notes in Family Tree Maker. There are person notes, research notes, and fact notes. And in just a moment here, I'll show you where you're going to find all of those. But there are a couple of things that you need to know about how these notes sync with your online tree so that you can make some decisions for yourself about where best to keep those notes. Person notes sync with your online tree and are visible to you as the tree owner and to anyone you have invited to be an editor to your tree. Person notes are probably the notes that I use the most. So let me just show you where you're going to find those. When you're in Family Tree Maker, excuse me, when you're in Family Tree Maker, there's a little notes icon on the person panel, and then the little first icon underneath that is the person note, and that's going to open up your person note screen. This exact same person note can also be found on the person tab. See, right now I'm on the tree tab. This can be found on the person tab down here at the bottom of your screen. So I can drag this up and I can see the notes, my person notes here, okay? So these are the person notes. Now, most of you who've spent some time with me know that I use the person notes very, very heavily. It's where I transcribe all of my records. And actually, one of the things you can do is you can change the text size so that it's bigger or smaller, just depending on your screen resolution and what you want to see. So let me just make that a little bigger. I transcribe every record I find, census records, a death record, here's a death certificate, an obituary. At the very bottom, I've got some notes about a photograph that I have of her. I include any record I find, and basically what I end up doing, there's a couple of reasons I do it this way, or that I do it this way. The first thing is it starts to create a little mini biography about this person as I locate records about them. So it helps me to understand a little bit more about their life, and it's all in one place, in one view, so that I can just quickly read through this and know a little bit more about them. The other reason I do this way is because very often as I'm typing out or transcribing a particular record, it's really easy here then on this singular screen to compare, maybe I just found the 1900 census. I can compare it to the other census records I've located for this person, make sure that I'm looking at the right record for the right person. Very often it'll happen that I'll pull up a record, I'll start typing or transcribing this record and realize that I don't think this is for the person I thought it was for. And then it's very easy to just delete that note because I always transcribe a record before I attach that record and create the source citation. So that's how I use my person notes. Some of you may have also seen me use my person notes as a little bit of a research log. Here on this particular great-grandfather, you'll notice that I've transcribed the records I've found, but I've also made notes about the records I have not yet found. And I've just plugged them into the appropriate place here chronologically in these notes so that I know that I still need to go find this particular record. So it becomes not just a little biography, not just a research tool to help me make sure I'm tracking the right people, but it also becomes a little bit of a to-do list for each of these people. And you can see I transcribe not just census records or records that I find online at Ancestry.com, but here's a transcription out of a family Bible that's in the possession of one of my mother's cousins. Here is a private note from an interview I did with my mother about her grandfather. There's a copy, again, of his obituary. And then down here at the bottom, I've got some little personal notes to myself about some additional things about his life that I would like to record, just little stories and pieces of information. I do that lots of different ways. So if I come up here to this particular grandfather, there's actually some family stories about this man. And so I recorded some of those family stories right here at the top of the notes, so that I had that information captured, so that I knew what it was that I was looking for, so that I had some information about his career and how he died, all of that came from family stories. Recorded that right here at the top of the notes. Then as I started collecting information, was able to verify some of that information. Excuse me. And then actually ended up finding a history of the county that had a little mini biography of him. And so I just recorded that from the history of Ashland County, Ohio by this person. I recorded the little the few paragraphs there about this ancestor of mine directly into the notes. Now, some of you may wonder, well, why didn't I just create a story or a document or attach, why not just attach the obituary as a media item or attach this biography as a media item? And that's fine, you can do that, but I prefer to have a singular view of their whole life without having to open up individual documents every time I want to look at a census record or an obituary or whatever. So yes, I do attach those things as source citations, but I do transcribe them into the notes as well. Again, what I'm trying to do is create almost like a mini biography of this person's life so that I've got it all in one place, in one quick, easy place for me to view. So that's how I use the person notes. Again, you're going to find them in this person panel when you're in the tree view. When you're in the tree view, you have the tree, you have the family group sheet at the bottom, and you have the person panel over here. And all of those are sizable. You can make them, adjust them based on your screen. You can pop your index in and out, and I love being able to do that so that I can quickly jump around in the index when I need to. And then as you highlight different people in the tree, you'll notice down here the family group sheet changes, over here the person panel changes. So the person notes, in the person panel, it's the third icon, the little notepad, and then this little first icon with a little person. Those same notes then also appear on the person tab at the very bottom of the screen. So we just have them in two locations, but they're the exact same notes. So those are the person notes. They do sync with your online tree, and they are visible only to tree owners and editors. Here's where you're going to find them in your online tree. If I come into Robert here, I go to his profile page. One of the icons here is going to be View Note, and you can see here there are the notes, word for word. It's the exact same note that I had there in Family Tree Maker. Okay, and I can edit it or change or update it here, and it will sync back with my online tree. Now, depending on your screen resolution, if I make my screen a little bit bigger, you're going to notice that View Notes button disappears. And that's because we just move it or bump it under the More button. So there it is right there under the More button. If your screen resolution is large, or if you're viewing Ancestry.com on an iPad or some kind of mobile device, you might not see that. You might not see all of these buttons, because the larger you get, the less screen space we have. So we just dump it under the View Note button, okay? Or under the More button. So that is the person notes. Let's talk about research notes. Research notes, first of all, you need to know that they do sync with your online tree, but they're not visible to you or to anyone else. And that is with version 2014 of Family Tree Maker. Prior to that, research notes did not even sync with the online tree. The purpose for having them sync now is that if something happens to your Family Tree Maker file and you need to download a copy of your tree from Ancestry.com, those notes are going to still be there because we have synced them with your online tree, but they are not visible on your online tree. There's really no clean place to put them, and so that was why that decision was made. So research notes, I don't use them, but I have talked to several people because I knew I was going to be doing this presentation and wanted to understand a little bit more about how they were using research notes. Here's where you're going to find them. Again, under that little notes button, you have the first icon here that is a person note, and the second icon here that is your research note. And just like the person note, you can also find it on the person tab. I just come here and I have a little secondary icon here, which is my research notes, and I can just start typing away in that particular field. So research notes, the way that some people are using them is kind of like how I am using my person notes for this particular great-grandfather here. What they would do is they would actually just take these things that I have bolded, and those would go in their research notes. So they wouldn't actually put them here in the person notes until after they found the record. And prior to finding the record, they would keep those notations in the research notes field. It's also a really good place to keep a research log. So for example, and I've done this a little bit here, I haven't found this great-grandfather yet in the 1900 census. I have searched in Missouri and Oklahoma for him specifically, and that I've made a note here that I need to try looking for city directories in order to pinpoint his location. And that's great, but that's really not a detailed research note. When I say I searched in Missouri and Oklahoma, what does that mean? Did I search for anybody with the last name of Kerr in those two states? Did I search for all Alberts in those two states? Did I only search for Albert Kerrs? Did I search in specific counties? Okay, so a lot of times we do searches when we have name variations, and a true research log records all of the variations of the search that we do so that we know what has not worked and we don't keep redoing failed searches, so that we can keep finding new ways to search to locate the information that we're looking for. Did I only search on Ancestry.com? Did I try other indexes for the census? I don't know, because I didn't make a really detailed research note, okay? And so that's how a lot of my colleagues and other genealogists that I've spoken with are using this research note field, is to record things like spelling variations of names, specific locations to search or that they have searched, so that they know what they've done, what they still need to do, okay? Again, those notes are going to sync with your online tree, but they're not going to be visible in your online tree. And the purpose of syncing them with your online tree is just so that we preserve them in case you ever have to download your tree back into Family Tree Maker for any reason. The third kind of note you're going to find on Ancestry.com is a fact note. And like the research notes, they do sync with your online tree, but they are not visible in your online tree. You're going to find these at a fact level. So every single fact I have here in my tree, so I have a name fact, I have a gender fact, I have a birth fact, okay? Any name fact I have in my tree, over here I'm going to have a notes field for that. And so I can make additional notes about that particular fact if I feel the need to do so. Again, this is not a feature I use. I prefer to use the person notes almost entirely. You decide what works for you, okay? That's the important thing here, is you have to decide what's going to work for you, and when you make that decision, be consistent so that you're not looking in 20 different places, so that you always use the research notes and the fact notes, or that you always use the person notes, or however you decide to do it. Just be consistent in doing that. So you can add facts over here. For example, a name fact might be an excellent place to record, again, some of those spelling variations that you need to remember to search when you're looking for this person or people in this particular family. Lots of different ways to do that. And every individual fact is going to have that notes field. And you'll see here it's labeled birth notes. If I come up here, click on the name, it's name notes, okay? So they're notes specific to that fact. Okay, so those are the three major kinds of notes in Family Tree Maker and where you're going to find them, how they work with your online tree. There are a couple of other places where you can just add free-form text. One of them is actually called a note. It's in the Relationships tab. If I click here on his spouse, you can see here I have a note for that relationship. So this was his spouse, and you do have options of denoting the type of relationship between any two people. If you add it as a spouse, you can change it to partner or friend or single. You know, if two single people had a child together, you want them both listed as the parents of that child, but they do not have a marital relationship, and so you can change that to single. Lots of different ways you can adjust that. You can also change the status. So they were spouses, but that relationship, they're divorced or separated, or you can change that status of that relationship. And then the notes is just, again, another place where you can record information pertinent to that relationship. These notes, all notes on Ancestry or in Family Tree Maker can be privatized. So any note I make, there's going to be a lock icon, and I can just click that lock, and it's going to make that note private, which means if I was to print out a report for a family member or a chart or to make a book or to share my file or any of that, if I was to do any of that, any of those notes I've marked private are not going to be shared with whoever it is that I'm sharing that information with. Okay? When I print a report, I will be given specific instructions about whether or not I want to include private notes or not. And so I can make that decision. So if you have some sensitive information about relationships in your family, and we all have those different relationships in our family where some of that information is sensitive or could be hurtful to people who are still living, and yet we still want to record it, we still want to create an accurate record of the family history, we can make notes of that and then just mark it private so that those notes don't get printed on anything that might get into the hands of somebody that might be hurt by that information. So all notes on Ancestry.com, person notes, relationship notes, any notes, you're going to have the option to privatize them with that little, just look for that little lock icon. Excuse me. Okay, so person notes, research notes, fact notes. There are also relationship notes. And then the final place, and we don't actually even call these notes, but when you are looking at a particular fact or particular source, you do have a place to enter some citation text, and you have a reference note. The notes that you can make specific to that particular citation or that particular source. Now, the purpose of source notes, the genealogical purpose for source notes is to make a note about the source itself. So, for example, if I had gone into a courthouse and I was looking at a book and I had found a record that listed the information about the marriage of my great-great-grandparents, but that book was falling apart, the binding's coming off, pages are falling out. I've maybe taken a digital photograph or a scan of that in the courthouse, but chances are next time I come back, or if the next person that comes back to look at that particular record, if it's falling apart, it might no longer be in existence, or it might have been put in cold storage by the archive and not accessible. And so that's the kind of source note that I might make, is that the book was in very poor condition, falling apart. Maybe I'm looking at a census image, and this particular image was, when it was microfilmed, it's blurry. And so I have read and transcribed it the best I can, but I might make a note on that source that the images for this particular town or this particular section of records are blurry, the microfilm images, and that's what I had to work with. So the purpose of a source note is to make notes about the source itself, the condition it's in, the ease of access. If I have to sweet talk my way into a set of stacks in an archive, and I know the name of the archivist who finally let me in to see them, maybe I record the name of that person in my notes for that source, so that if I have to ever go back to that location, I know who to talk to. I know who was willing to work with me. Different ways you can use that, but those are your source notes. So anytime you have a source, you can make notes about that particular source as well. And again, like all notes, they can be made private or not. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about notes is where you can actually look at all the notes that you have in your tree. If you come over here to the publish icon, this is where you can print any number of charts, and you have all kinds of different charts and genealogy reports and person reports, relationship reports, place reports. Seriously, any report you can possibly think of. There are even custom reports that you can design or create on your own. One of the person reports is a notes report. That allows you to run a report of all of the notes that you've included in your tree, and you can decide the options. When you create this report, it gives you a list of options, and you can include or exclude any of those types of notes. So person, fact, relationship, or research. You can say, I only want to see person notes, or I only want to see fact notes, or I want to see all person and research notes, or any combination thereof. You decide. It will show you the name of the person with their birth date and death date, and then all of the notes associated with that person. So it's just a really good way to get a handle on what you've already done, where those notes reside in your system, so that you can start to either clean them up or be a little bit more consistent about how you take notes, or look at what notes you've written that you totally forgot you had. I do that sometimes. I make detailed notes and then I forget to read them before I dive back into researching that person, and sometimes I find myself retreading the same ground even though I made an excellent note about what I had already done and had not done. So it's a good way to just review the notes that you have available. Now keep in mind, every note field on Ancestry or in Family Tree Maker has the ability to hold up to 200 printed pages of text. So if you are an avid note taker and you run this report, you could end up with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. The purpose of creating the report isn't always to print it. Sometimes it's just to review so that you have an idea of what's going on. But just be aware that those notes fields can hold up to 200 pages of information. Okay, let's just do a quick review of the things we've already talked about. Make sure we've covered everything. Any note can be marked private. Those private notes will not be printed on any reports unless you specifically indicate that you want them to be printed. So that's a great way to make sure that you record family stories and family information, but you can privatize it so that if any of that information would be hurtful to anyone who's still living, you're still showing some responsibility and care for those living family members and their feelings. There is that notes report under the publish button that allows you to see all of the notes that you've created, just so that you can get your arms around or your mind around where you've created notes so far and what some of those notes have to say. But you decide what works best for you. I've shown you what I do. I use person notes almost exclusively because I prefer to have everything in one location, quickly and easily visible to me, and I want that information to be synced with my online tree and to be visible when I'm only accessing my tree through Ancestry.com. And so that's how I've decided to do that. If you want to do relationship notes, fact notes, research notes, create notes to your heart's content, that's fine. However you decide to do it, though, just be consistent. Make sure that you figure out what works for you and then do that consistently. One of the frustrations that we often have as genealogists is we start down one path and then get distracted and do something a different way and then go back and can't figure out where we put those other notes because we don't remember how we used to do it. Anyway, so just decide what works for you and be consistent. But keep notes. Keep notes in some fashion, even if you just use a notebook. And I did for years. I used a notebook and spreadsheets, and I've transferred all of that information now into Family Tree Maker, so I am completely paperless now with my family history research. And for me, that's what works. But you decide what works for you. But keep notes. I think you'll find that when you do that, you'll redo a lot less work. You'll have a lot quicker success with your searches because you'll know all the different spelling variations. You'll have made a record or a note of what works and what doesn't work. It also means that you'll be more likely to be climbing your own family tree because you'll know exactly what it is about this family that makes them unique from all other families who might have similar names and live in similar places. And so then when you attach a record, you'll know that this record really is for your family and not for somebody else's. So figure out the system that works for you, and Family Tree Maker makes it easy and gives you lots of options to do that. If you're watching this presentation live, I will be on chat in just a few minutes to answer any additional questions you might have. If you're watching an archived version of this on YouTube, just leave a comment in the comments field here on YouTube, and we will monitor those and respond as necessary. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.